The message reached me at 0217 station time, and the moment I saw the 7 glowing seals on the screen, I knew this was not a normal summons. No greeting, no subject line, no explanation. Just a chamber number, a time, and one cold instruction. Report immediately. Alone. I was already awake. That was the curse of living on Bastion Relay, a deep space station hanging on the edge of mapped territory. After 3 years there, sleep became something light and fragile. The station never truly rested. Its metal bones hummed day and night, and that sound got into your nerves until even silence felt fake. I pulled on my uniform jacket, grabbed the mug beside my bed, and took a sip of coffee so bitter it felt personal. I had been an emergency medic before I became a diplomat. I had learned 2 useful habits from that life. First, never panic before you have facts. Second, always carry bad coffee. Long nights do not deserve good coffee. The Grand Council chamber looked exactly the way powerful beings think power should look. High ceiling, curved walls of black stone, tier after tier of seats rising in a half circle. Representatives from 7 species waited above me, each surrounded by aides, guards, and glowing screens. And at the center of the room, there was only one chair, mine. They had even replaced the usual council seat with a human one. That meant they had planned this carefully. That meant this was serious. I sat down, set my mug by my foot, and looked up at the chamber. "Envoy Talia Mercer," said the first counselor, his voice smooth through the translator. "Thank you for attending on such short notice." Counselor Seirun of the Thalari always spoke first. He was ancient, patient, and terrifying in the way old historians often are. He had studied the rise and collapse of civilizations for longer than humanity had known electricity. I gave him a small nod. "You called, I came." A flicker passed through his upper limbs. With his kind, that was the same as a deep breath. "We require clarification," he said. A file appeared in the air above me, huge and bright enough to fill half the chamber. It was Humanity's Council Threat Profile. I had never seen it before. I wished I still hadn't. The report rolled open in neat glowing lines. Lifespan, short. Physical durability, below galactic average. Telepathic ability, none. Collective consciousness, none. Regeneration, limited. Military range, moderate. Expansion speed, average. Strategic influence, growing. So far, it was insulting but fair. Then I saw the final line. Threat classification, unassigned, do not provoke. I read it twice. Not low, not medium, not severe. Unassigned. That was worse. Across the chamber, no one moved. No rustle, no whispered side talk. Even the insect-like aides near the upper tiers stayed frozen. Seirun studied me carefully. 3 separate evaluations across 8 standard years returned the same result. I looked from the file back to him. "And that bothers you?" "It does." Another counselor leaned forward, his plated face hard as armor. Predator species do not file caution requests lightly, yet 3 have done so regarding humans. That pulled my full attention. The armored one continued. The Karok war clans, the Vayan data circles, and the Silent Watchers. That last name landed heavy. The Watchers had remained neutral for centuries. If even they were paying attention, something had gone very wrong. Seirun lowered the display a little. "We do not understand why the galaxy fears your people." I wrapped both hands around my mug, though the coffee had already gone cold. That question had teeth. Because the truth was, They were not afraid of what humanity had done. They were afraid of what humanity might do once it truly cared. I looked up at the 7 tiers of waiting faces and said quietly, "All right, show me the incidents." And when the first case file opened, I realized this meeting was not about diplomacy anymore. It was about warning. The first incident was only a colony shortage on paper, but when the council showed me what those trapped humans did to survive, I understood why the room had called me here in the middle of the night. The first case appeared over the chamber floor in pale blue light. A colony world, a dry planet called Idon 4. Population at the time of the incident, 4,216 humans. Cause of crisis? Supply blockade during a border dispute between 2 alien powers. Projected survival rate after 4 months, under 11%. I stared at the numbers, then at the faces watching me from the upper levels. Seirun spoke in the calm voice of someone reading weather reports, not death estimates. Neither side targeted the settlers directly, he said. They were simply cut off. No food ships, no medicine shipments, no emergency extraction. Collateral pressure, another counselor added. That was a polite way to say innocent people had been left to die because they were inconvenient. I already knew where this was going, but I wanted to hear how they told it. Seirun moved one hand and the report advanced. Expected result, he said, was colony loss within 1 seasonal cycle. I said nothing. Actual result, he continued, after 17 months of isolation, all colonists remained alive. That got a silence from the room again, as if even now they still did not enjoy saying it out loud. A new image opened over the floor. Makeshift farms built inside storage bays. Water filters rebuilt from damaged mining units. Protein grown from algae cultures that had originally been stored for soil repair. Then came the part that almost made me smile. They also held a competitive cooking event, Seirun said. I looked up. They did what? He did not seem happy about the sentence he was about to say. A cooking event, he repeated. The category title, as translated, was Best Meal Made from Things That Should Not Be Food. A few low sounds moved through the chamber. Confusion, disgust, unease. I leaned back slowly in my chair. That sounded exactly like us. One of the armored delegates spoke next. We found this behavior disturbing. Why? I asked, his dark eyes fixed on me. Because they treated extinction conditions as a problem-solving exercise. I almost laughed, but I kept it down to a breath. That's because it was one. Seirun studied me closely. They did not behave like a species facing certain collapse. They were, I said. They just refused to stop there. The council screen shifted again. Recovered journal entries, daily ration charts, engineering notes, medical records. Then one final personal log written by the colony's lead systems mechanic, Jonah Vale. If this is how we go, then at least let's make the universe work for it. I looked away from the display. That line hurt more than the numbers had. Not because it sounded brave, because it sounded tired. Tired people tell the truth in ways heroes never do. A thin, silver-skinned counselor from the upper tier leaned forward. Why did they not give up to despair? I lifted my mug, found it empty, and set it down again. Because despair doesn't cook dinner, I said. The answer hung there longer than I expected. No one laughed. No one even moved. Seirun broke the silence. The colony should have collapsed. Yes, I said quietly. It should have. But it did not. No. Why? Now every eye in the chamber was on me. I looked at the frozen image of those settlers on Idon 4, thin, exhausted, standing around a metal table with bowls in their hands, like they had won something important just by lasting one more day. Then I gave them the truth. Because humans are at their most dangerous when giving up would be the sensible choice. And the second I said it, I knew the room understood a little more than before. Not enough, but more. Then Saren opened the second case, a research station half destroyed in deep space, and what the human scientists did there was even harder for the Council to explain.
The second case opened with a burst of static and a broken image of a station hanging in space. Its name was Meridian Reach. Human researchers worked there, under a shared science agreement with 2 council species. It was supposed to be a quiet place, far from trade routes, far from war zones, far from anything that made headlines. But quiet places are not always safe places. Saren enlarged the image, and I saw the damage clearly. One whole side of the station had been torn open. Metal ribs were exposed to the dark. 3 outer labs were gone. Fire damage marked the remaining structure like black scars. Emergency barriers had sealed part of the station, but even from the image, I could see how bad it was. An attack? I asked. Saren's expression did not change. Crossfire during a territorial conflict. Another polite phrase, another ugly truth. Someone powerful had fired near a research station, and the people inside had paid for it. I felt a slow, familiar heat rise in my chest. How many died? None, he said. That made me look up. Saren advanced the report. Structural integrity fell below 42%. Standard council procedure under those conditions is total evacuation. And the humans? I asked. They did not evacuate. Of course they didn't. I rubbed my thumb along the side of my empty mug and waited. A new set of images appeared. Scientists in patched pressure suits, dragging equipment across damaged corridors. A woman kneeling beside a cracked console, rewiring it by hand. A lab that had clearly once been a cafeteria. Someone had painted a sign over the entrance in thick black letters. If it still has walls, it still counts. I let out one soft breath through my nose. There we were again. Saren kept reading. The lead human researcher, Dr. Lena Voss, moved all surviving equipment to the inner ring and resumed her work within 18 hours. That got another reaction from the chamber. Not shock this time. Something closer to discomfort. A counselor from the 3rd tier clicked her mandibles together. She resumed work? Yes, Saren said. On what basis? He turned one pale hand toward the display. Her written note is attached. The words appeared over the chamber floor. The station is damaged, not the data. The question still exists. Therefore, the work continues. For a moment, nobody spoke. I read the sentence again. It was so human it almost hurt. Not dramatic, not heroic, just stubborn, plain, and final. The silver-skinned counselor from before leaned down over his console. She thanked the structural breach in her report. I blinked. What? Sarah nodded once. Her official paper included a note stating that the destruction of the Eastern labs improved sound isolation for resonance testing. I shut my eyes for 1 second. Then I opened them again. She thanked the damage? The counselor repeated, as if the sentence itself offended logic. Yes, I said. That sounds like her. Several heads turned toward me. You know this individual? Saren asked. Not personally, I said, but I know the type. The room stayed silent, so I gave them more. When humans are trapped in a bad situation, I said, we do one of 2 things first. We either swear at it or organize it. A few aides shifted uneasily. We label the problem. We stack supplies. We move the tables. We make jokes that should not be funny. Then somebody says, all right, what still works? And once that question gets asked, the panic starts losing. Saren watched me very carefully. The report says the researchers continued on schedule, he said. I nodded. Yes. He paused. That is what the council found alarming. I looked at the torn open station, at the bent walls, the smoke stains, the people still working in the middle of ruin. Then I answered in a low voice, "That's because you think survival means stopping everything until danger passes." I lifted my eyes to the chamber. Humans don't always do that. Sometimes continuing is how we survive. And this time, the silence that followed felt heavier than before, like the room was beginning to understand that human fear was real, but it was rarely in charge. Then Saren opened the third case, and the chamber learned about a captured human soldier who should have broken in prison, but instead did something far stranger.
The third case began with a prison file, not a battlefield report, not a science log, a prison file. That alone changed the feeling in the chamber. The hologram shifted, and a narrow cell appeared above the floor. Cold walls, no windows, low light, a single platform built into one side, the kind of room designed to reduce a person into silence. Saren spoke more slowly this time. Corporal Arias Sloan, human military, captured during a border incident near the Nareth Divide, held for 8 months in a Celt detention facility. I studied the image. No bruises, no blood, no visible torture. That almost made it worse, because there are many ways to break someone. Pain is only one of them. Isolation is another. Boredom is another. Time is another. The facility was not built for human biology, Saren said. Conditions were considered survivable, but deeply adverse. I knew what that meant. Too cold, bad air mix, wrong food balance, no familiar rhythms, no comfort, no proper rest. Slow damage, the kind that does not look dramatic on a report. A tall counselor from the upper right tier leaned forward. The expectation was decline. Saren nodded once. Instead, the subject began studying the language used by the staff. I looked up. Studying? Yes. For negotiation? No. For escape planning? No. He paused. For intellectual stimulation. That pulled a strange silence from the room. I could feel it moving through them. That same confusion again. That same question. Why would a prisoner do that? The report continued. By the second month, Arya had learned enough of the local speech to follow staff conversations through the walls. By the third month, she was speaking back. By the fourth, she was correcting grammar. By the fifth, 3 guards had started stopping outside her cell to ask language questions before shift change. One of the aides near the second tier made a sharp clicking sound of disbelief. Saren did not react. A staff member later reported that the prisoner had become socially inconvenient to classify as hostile. That line nearly got me, not because it was funny, because I could see exactly how it happened. A lonely guard, a voice through the wall, a question asked to pass time, another the next day, then another, then a habit, then a person. That is the problem with humans. We keep becoming people, even in places built to strip that away. What happened in month 8? I asked. Saren lifted one hand and the last note appeared. Release authorized. Internal cohesion risk increased by continued detention. The chamber stayed quiet. She talked her way out, one counselor said softly. I shook my head. No. Every eye turned to me again. She lived her way out, I said. That landed harder, because it was true. Arya had not overpowered anyone. She had not escaped through vents. She had not turned violent. She had done something much stranger. She had remained fully human in a place designed to make that impossible. And somehow, that had unsettled her captors more than resistance would have. Saren folded his hands. Your species does not respond to pressure in expected ways. No, I said quietly. We respond personally. He held my gaze, and for the first time since this session started, I saw it clearly in the room. Not just confusion, not just concern, fear. Not fear of human strength, fear of human refusal. Because strength can be measured, weapons can be counted. But a person who looks at suffering and still stays curious, still jokes, still connects, still keeps going, that kind of person is hard to contain. And a whole species like that? That was worse, much worse. Then the chamber lights dimmed slightly, signaling a recess. I rose from my chair, reached for my mug, and looked up at the tiers above me. Some of them avoided my eyes, some did not. One of them, an armored war delegate from the outer sectors, was still staring directly at me, and the look in his face told me the break was not going to be peaceful. The recess should have been a chance to breathe. Instead, the most dangerous being in the chamber followed me outside and made the mistake of trying to intimidate me alone.
The recess hall outside the chamber was wide, bright, and far too quiet. It had been built for peace talks, soft lights, smooth walls, air balanced for 7 different species, enough open space that no one would feel crowded or trapped. It still felt tense. I walked to a hydration station near the far wall, set my mug down, and filled a paper cup with water. My hand was steady. My pulse was not. Behind me, the chamber doors sealed shut with a low mechanical sigh. Then I felt it. That shift in space. That ancient instinct humans still carry somewhere under language and training and civilized behavior. The silent warning that says something large is close. I turned. The armored delegate from the upper tier was walking toward me. He was General Kor Vol of the Raft Dominion, and up close he looked even bigger than he had in the chamber. Tall, broad, layered armor plates across his chest and shoulders, like his body had been designed by war and improved by survival. His species had spent centuries winning border conflicts no one else could survive. He stopped only a few steps away, too close by human standards, too close on purpose. "You are smaller than I expected," he said. His translator made the words flat, but not harmless. I took a sip of water. "That must be hard for you," I said. Something moved behind his eyes. Not anger yet, interest. That was almost worse. Around us, other delegates had gone very still. They were pretending not to watch, which only made it clearer that they were watching very closely. Kor tilted his head. "Your kind is soft, short-lived, fragile, and yet this chamber bends around your species as if it expects injury from a creature that should fear almost everything." I set the cup down. The old medic part of my brain was already doing the math. Distance, reach, weight, exit points, witnesses, security response time. The human brain is very good at that kind of math. But once the numbers were done, something else took over. Calm. Not because I thought I could beat him. I couldn't. Not physically, not in any way that mattered. But fear only works when the other person believes it should. And General Kor was beginning to realize I did not. "We do fear things," I said quietly. "We just don't obey them." He leaned in a fraction more. "That sounds like foolishness." "No," I said. "That sounds like practice." A ripple moved through the hall. Kor stared at me, waiting for me to step back. I didn't. I looked right at the armor plates covering his throat and chest, then at the heavy hands hanging at his sides. He could break me. We both knew it, and that was exactly why I smiled. Not a big smile, not a mocking one, just enough to tell him I had already understood the danger and chosen to stay anyway. For the first time, something in his posture changed. Very small, very real. He stepped back. Only one step, but it was enough. The entire hall felt it. Predators know fear in others. That is easy.
What they do not know how to handle is someone who sees them clearly and stays. Kor's voice came lower this time. Why did I move? I held his gaze, because now he was finally asking the right question. You moved because some part of you knows humans are not dangerous when we're scared. I picked up my mug. We're dangerous when we've already made peace with the cost. That line stayed in the air between us like a blade. Kor did not answer. He simply looked at me as if he had seen something he would not be able to forget. Then the chamber doors opened behind us. Recess was over. And when I walked back inside, I knew the room was no longer studying human behavior from a safe distance. Now they had felt it. When the session resumed, the council stopped asking what humans had done and started asking the question they had feared from the beginning. What would humanity become if something it truly loved was threatened?
When I walked back into the chamber, the feeling had changed. Before the recess, they had been curious. Now they were careful. That difference matters. Curiosity still believes it is safe. Carefulness does not. I took my seat at the center of the floor. My mug was still warm in my hand. Above me, the 7 tiers of delegates settled back into place, but the room no longer felt balanced. Something had shifted in the hall outside, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Counselor Siren did not waste time. "Envoy Mercer," he said, "we will proceed differently." I looked up at him. "All right." He folded his upper hands together. "The incidents have shown a pattern. Your people survive conditions that should end them. They continue through damage that should stop them. They form social bonds where isolation should break them." He paused. "But this does not answer the deeper question." The great display behind me changed again, not to another case file this time, not to charts or survival reports, just one sentence in bright white letters. What happens when humans care deeply enough? No one spoke. That question was the real reason I had been dragged out of bed in the middle of the night. Not because they feared our ships, not because they feared our weapons, because they feared our focus. Siren's voice dropped lower. "Your species has not yet faced true extinction pressure at a civilizational level. Not in the Council era. The files we reviewed may represent only your baseline." "That's right," I said. The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. A delegate from the left tier leaned forward. "Baseline?" "Yes." He sounded offended by the word. "You describe 17 impossible incidents as normal behavior?" I met his stare. Not normal, familiar. That made several of them shift. Good. They needed to understand this clearly. Siren's eyes stayed on me. "Then answer directly. What is the source of this behavior?" I thought about the colony on Edon 4, the scientists at Meridian Reach, Arya Sloan in her cell, learning a new language because boredom had failed to defeat her. Then I thought about General Kor stepping back in the recess hall, and I gave them the truth. "You all believe survival is about limits," I said. "You calculate what a species can endure, where it breaks, when it pulls back. And most of the time that works. It's smart. It keeps civilizations alive." No one interrupted. "But humans do something else after the math is finished." I leaned forward slightly. "We decide whether the math gets the final vote." Siren's expression did not move, but every part of his attention sharpened. "The odds matter," I said. "We are not blind. We see the danger. We see the cost. We know when a situation is bad." I let one slow breath out. "We just don't always treat probability like a command." Another silence, deeper this time. Then Siren asked the question in the clearest way possible. "And what makes humans ignore those limits?" I looked at the words still glowing behind me. Then I answered softly. "2 things." The chamber seemed to lean in. "Love," I said, "and insult." That got a reaction. Real this time. Confusion from some, unease from others. So I continued.
If you threaten something we love, we keep going long past where logic says stop. And if you tell us we can't survive something, I let the faintest hint of a smile touch my mouth, then half of humanity will survive it just to make your statement look stupid. Even Siren went still at that. Now they understood why the files had failed. Because fear alone did not explain us. Hope didn't either. Neither did aggression. The engine under humanity was stranger than that, and far less predictable. Then one silent observer in the chamber finally moved, and the words that came next changed the entire meaning of the meeting.
The chamber stayed silent for several long seconds after I finished speaking. No one challenged me. No one laughed. No one even looked away. Then, from the highest and darkest tier in the room, someone finally moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough for every eye in the chamber to lift. It was the silent observer, the one who had said almost nothing since the session began, a representative of the Aurelian Watchers, ancient, remote, nearly impossible to read. Their species did not waste words. Most of the time, they barely wasted motion. They had watched empires rise, burn, recover, and vanish again. They studied history the way most people studied weather. And now one of them was standing. The translator took a moment before the sound turned into language. "We know this pattern," the Watcher said. That changed the room. Not loudly, not at all once, but I felt it, like air pressure dropping before a storm. Counselor Searun turned toward the upper tier. "You have seen similar behavior before?" The Watcher did not answer at once. Their face remained still, pale and unreadable beneath the chamber lights. "At another time," they said at last, "in another age." No one moved. No one wanted to interrupt them. That, more than anything, told me how serious this had become. The Watcher lowered their gaze toward me. "The species was not physically dominant," they said. "Its lifespan was short. Its technology, while effective, did not appear exceptional beside older powers." I felt my stomach tighten. The chamber was so quiet, I could hear the soft hum inside the floor beneath my chair. "But," the Watcher continued, "it formed attachments beyond strategic necessity, deep attachments, irrational attachments. It accepted impossible loss thresholds when defending what it loved, and when cornered," the translator paused, searching for the right words, "it became difficult to stop." A murmur moved through the chamber. Not conversation, not argument, recognition. General Corval had not taken his eyes off me. Searian spoke carefully. "What became of that species?" The Watcher answered in the same flat tone. "It won." That single word struck harder than anything else said all night, because it was not spoken with admiration. It was spoken with memory. A smaller counselor in the lower tier leaned forward sharply. "If they won, why are they not among the great powers now?" The Watcher was silent for a moment. Then they gave the answer no one in that room wanted. Because after victory, they could not return to what they had been before. That hit me in the chest, not as a threat, as a warning, because I understood it instantly. The chamber did not fully, but I did. A species can survive war. It can survive grief. It can survive terrible things and still keep moving. But some victories cost so much that even the winners do not walk away unchanged. And suddenly, this meeting felt different again. Not like an inquiry, not like suspicion, like preparation. Searun slowly turned back toward me. "Envoy Mercer," he said, "if humanity has not yet been pushed to that level, then what we have seen so far
maybe restraint. I held his gaze. Yes, I said. No one spoke after that, because now the question was no longer whether the galaxy should fear humanity. Now the question was, what kind of event would force humanity to show its full shape? And the moment that thought settled across the room, a red light flashed across the edge of the central chamber table. Priority signal, emergency channel. Seirun looked down at it, then back at me. Then he opened the transmission, and everything changed. The message that entered the chamber was not a warning, it was proof that somewhere in the dark, something had already made the first move.
The transmission opened in total silence. No greeting, no formal code. Just a red field report stamped with emergency authority from 3 outer monitoring stations. Saren read the first line once, then again. His face changed. Only a little. But in a room full of beings trained to hide emotion, that little change was enough to chill the whole chamber. "Report," General Kor said. Saren touched the display, and the message spread across the chamber in sharp white text. 3 inhabited systems have gone dark. No battle signatures, no distress traffic, no debris field large enough to suggest ordinary destruction. Population estimates, catastrophic loss. For 1 second, I thought I had misunderstood it. Gone dark could mean many things in deep space: sabotage, shielding interference, sensor failure, false reading. Then the next lines appeared. Matter remains present. Planetary mass remains stable. Acoustic resonance absent. No survivor signals detected. A counselor on the second tier made a harsh, choking sound. Absent? Saren's voice was very low now. The report states that material vibration across all scanned surfaces has flattened. That meant almost nothing in ordinary language, and everything in scientific language. I stared at the words, feeling my throat tighten. Not destroyed, not burned, not shattered. Silenced. That was worse. One of the Aurelian watchers leaned toward the display. For the first time that night, even they seemed disturbed. General Kor rose halfway from his seat. "Weapon?" "No confirmed signature," Saren said. Another counselor snapped. "Natural event?" "No model fits." A third voice came from the far tier. "Then what are we looking at?" The answer came from the watcher who had spoken before. Not loud, not rushed, but every being in the chamber heard it. "A message," they said. The room froze. My hands tightened around my mug so hard I thought it might crack. A message. 3 living systems reduced to a warning. Saren turned toward the high tier. "You are certain?" The watcher's pale face did not change. "No, but I am afraid." That may have been the most terrible sentence I had ever heard. Because fear from soldiers is one thing, fear from politicians is another. But fear from something ancient enough to remember forgotten ages? That meant the dark had moved, and the dark knew exactly how to be understood. The council erupted then, not in panic, but in that colder kind of alarm powerful people prefer. Multiple channels opened at once: risk models, border maps, threat projections, safe distance response lines, containment routes, defensive possibilities. It was orderly, it was intelligent. It was also, I already knew, going to be too slow. Then system names rolled across the lower edge of the report. The first one I did not know. The second I had heard of. The third made my heart stop. Saravan Reach. 16 months earlier, at a trade summit on Halion Port, I had shared a meal with a Saravan delegate named Dalen Reese. He was not important by council standards, not famous, not powerful, just a patient, kind man who had spent nearly 40 minutes showing me pictures of his children, 17 of them. He had smiled through every single photo. He had pointed out the smallest one and told me with absolute seriousness that little Ryan already followed him everywhere and cried whenever he left the room. Now Sarah Von Reach was a line in a death report, and the council was still opening discussion channels. I did not realize I had stood up until every eye in the chamber turned toward me. I was still holding the mug, still breathing, barely, because the meeting had changed again. This was no longer a question about what humans might become. Now it was about what happened when the line was crossed. Then the council made the most logical decision possible, and the moment I heard it, I knew humanity was about to do something the galaxy would never forget.
The council reacted exactly the way old powers always react when fear enters the room. They became even more careful. Saren restored order with one sharp motion of his hand. The overlapping voices faded. The side channels closed. The chamber settled into a cold, disciplined silence. Then the models began. Projected threat paths, safe perimeter ranges, resource calculations, delay windows, observation fleets, signal traps, long-distance probes, possible diplomatic risks if they acted too early, greater risks if they acted without understanding what they faced. Every part of it was reasonable. Every part of it made sense, and every second of it made me angrier. General Corps was the first to say it clearly. We do not engage an unknown force without classification. Another counselor added, we need more data. A third said, a forward response may trigger wider system loss. Then Saren called the formal vote. The chamber lights dimmed. 7 species, 7 votes. The result appeared above the floor in clean white letters. Observe, contain, do not escalate. For a moment, I just stared at it. It was the smart choice. It was the rational choice. It was the kind of decision civilizations make when they have lasted long enough to worship survival above all else. And it was unbearable. Because somewhere inside one of those dead systems had been Dalen Reese, and little Ryan, and 16 other children whose names I had never learned because there had seemed to be time. There is always supposed to be time. Saren's voice softened as he addressed the chamber. We will gather more information before committing to irreversible action. That was the sentence that did it. Irreversible action, as if what had already happened could somehow be filed under temporary, as if 3 silent systems were still the beginning of a discussion. I set my mug down very carefully. No one tried to stop me as I stepped away from my chair, maybe because no one thought I would leave, maybe because they were all still looking at the vote, maybe because some part of them already understood what it meant for a human to go quiet. I walked out of the chamber without asking permission. The doors shut behind me with a heavy sound that echoed down the corridor. My steps were steady. My face was calm. Inside, something had gone cold and sharp. Not panic, not grief, not yet. Something cleaner than that. Decision. The private communications room was empty when I entered. Good. I locked the door, keyed into a secured Earth diplomatic line, and waited through the encryption delay. 5 seconds. 12. 21. Then the channel opened. The duty officer on the other end looked young, too young for the expression already in his eyes. Earth Command, Officer Ben Hale speaking. This is Envoy Talia Mercer on Bastion Relay. His posture straightened instantly. Ma'am, I didn't waste time. The Council voted to observe. They're holding position until they understand the threat. Ben did not look surprised. That told me everything. How long ago did Earth receive the same report? I asked. He glanced off screen, then back at me. 6 hours ago. I took one slow breath, and, for the first time, something changed in his face. Not fear, not doubt, resolve. The fleet is already moving, he said. I closed my eyes for just 1 second. Of course it was. Of course humanity had not waited. Not after this. Not after children. When I opened my eyes again, my voice was quieter than before. How many ships? Ben gave me the number, and I understood all at once that the galaxy was about to see the one version of humanity the Council had never truly prepared for. For a few seconds, I said nothing. I just stood there in the private communications room, staring at Ben Hale through the secure channel
letting the numbers settle into my bones. It was not a defensive patrol. It was not a symbolic deployment. It was not a warning line. It was a fleet, a real one, large enough that no one on Earth had launched it by accident, large enough that someone had made a choice, signed it, and sent it forward before the council had even finished debating what words to use. Ben waited. He was young, but he understood enough not to fill silence that mattered. Finally, I asked, "Who authorized it?" Joint Command, Civilian Emergency Approval, Naval Command, and Frontier Response. That made sense. When humans disagree, we can waste years arguing over policy. But once something crosses a certain line, the arguing ends fast. Children were in those systems. Families were in those systems. Whole populations had been erased like they were nothing. Humanity was not going to sit still and study that. "Does the council know?" I asked. Ben gave a short shake of his head. "Not officially." Of course not. Earth had hidden the movement because it was ashamed. Earth had hidden it because the council would try to stop it, or worse, delay it. That was the thing old civilizations never fully understood about us. They thought hesitation was wisdom. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it truly was. But sometimes hesitation was just another way to let horror become permanent. I leaned one hand against the edge of the console. "Ben," I said quietly, "we don't know what did this." "I know." "We don't know if force will matter." "I know." "We don't know if the fleet can win." That time, he did not answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Not harder, steadier. "That's not the question anyone's asking anymore, ma'am." I closed my eyes, because yes, that was it exactly. The council kept asking what was wise. Humanity had moved past wise. Now the question was simpler and far more dangerous. Who did this, and how far do we have to go to make sure it never happens again? I opened my eyes and looked at Ben. "What's the public line?" He let out a slow breath. "There isn't one yet. Officially, we're still preparing a formal response. Unofficially," he glanced off screen for a moment. "Unofficially, nobody had to be told twice." I could picture it too clearly. Dockyards opening at an impossible speed, crews running half-dressed to ships, officers reading casualty estimates with flat faces and tight jaws, mechanics working with hands that would not stop shaking until they had something solid to fix. Not rage exactly, something colder, something more complete, the kind of silence humans fall into when grief becomes motion. I straightened. "Put me on the nearest outbound transfer." Then nodded once, as if he had expected that from the first second of the call. "Already done. Departure window in 36 minutes. Shuttle Bay 4. That nearly made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because of course it was already done. Because somewhere between the council's vote and my leaving the chamber, Earth had already decided what I was going to do next. And the truth was, I had decided too. I ended the call, grabbed my mug, and turned toward the door. For one moment, my hand rested on the panel. Then I thought of Dalen Reese, of Little Rian following his father around, of 3 whole systems turned into a message. And I stepped into the corridor, knowing the galaxy was about to learn something the Council almost understood too late. Humans did not become their most dangerous when they were threatened. They became their most dangerous when they were grieving. When I reached Shuttle Bay 4, I realized Earth had not just launched ships, it had awakened something far larger, and the people waiting there already knew there was no going back.
Shuttle Bay 4 was already full when I arrived. Not chaotic, not loud. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it was organized in the most human way possible. Fast, quiet, and terrifyingly efficient. Crew lines moved under white docking lights. Cargo drones slid across the floor carrying sealed cases of medical kits, repair tools, munitions, food packs, and emergency field shelters. Screens overhead flashed ship assignments and departure times. Officers checked names, stamped clearances, redirected personnel, and never once raised their voices. Nobody needed shouting. Everybody already knew. That was the part the Council would never fully understand. Human panic is noisy. Human decision is not. I tightened my grip on my bag and stepped into the line for outbound transfer. Around me were pilots, medics, comms officers, engineers, and Marines in half-fastened uniforms. Some looked barely old enough to have seen Rio War. Some looked old enough to have survived too much of it already. None of them looked uncertain. I glanced toward the far docking window. Beyond the station glass, ships were slipping away from Bastion Relay one by one, their engines burning cold blue against the dark. Not rushing, not scattered, moving with purpose. A young lieutenant 2 places ahead of me turned when he noticed my insignia. He had dark circles under his eyes and a fresh collar tab from Frontier Command. Couldn't have been more than 24. "Envoy Mercer?" he asked. "Yes." He gave a small nod, respectful but distracted. "You came down from the council chamber?" "I did." He watched me for half a second, then asked the question everyone in this bay was really asking in one form or another. Did they decide to act? There it was. Not what happened, not how bad is it, just will they move? I looked at him. They voted to wait. Something hard passed over his face, not surprise, not even anger, just confirmation, like hearing a diagnosis for something you already felt in your bones. He let out one breath and looked away toward the departing ships. "Yeah," he said softly, "that sounds right." A boarding signal flashed over our line. The lieutenant stepped forward, then paused and turned back one last time. My aunt lived in Saravon Reach. She ran a school. The words were simple, flat, almost calm, but I knew what he meant. Not information, explanation, a reason for why he was here, a reason he did not care whether the odds were good. I held his gaze. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, then, after a pause that felt much older than he was, he said, "Me too." That was all. No speech, no drama, no promises of revenge. He just faced forward again and kept moving when the line moved. And somehow that hurt more than rage would have, because this was what humanity looked like when the grief settled deep enough. Not wild, not blind, focused, terribly focused. I boarded the transfer shuttle with the rest of them. The cabin was tight, metal-walled, and already humming with pre-launch power. People strapped in without speaking much. A medic across from me checked her gloves twice, then folded her hands in her lap and stared at nothing. A crew chief near the hatch read a casualty projection on his wrist display, locked the screen, and closed his eyes for 3 seconds before opening them again. The shuttle lights dimmed. A pilot's voice came over the cabin speakers. "Departure in 10 seconds. No one answered. No one needed to. As the shuttle lifted from the bay and the station dropped away beneath us, Bastion Relay looked small against the dark, just another point of light in a universe that suddenly felt much colder than it had yesterday. Ahead of us, the fleet was already forming, layer after layer of human ships, not drifting, not hesitating, waiting. And as I looked at them, one clear thought settled in me with absolute certainty. The galaxy had mistaken human patience for weakness. Now it was going to learn the difference. But when our shuttle reached the fleet command carrier, I received the first full report from the dead systems, and what it revealed changed this mission from retaliation into something far more frightening. When our shuttle locked onto the command carrier, the hatch opened before the cabin lights had fully stabilized. No ceremony, no delay. A waiting officer met me at the ramp and led me through 3 sealed corridors to the fleet briefing room. The doors opened, and the first thing I saw was the main display. 3 dead systems, 3 cold maps, 3 circles of silence where life had been. Admiral Jonas Reed stood at the center of the room, with both hands behind his back. He was not a dramatic man, not loud, not the kind of leader who needed to perform certainty. That made him more frightening. He looked at me once. "Envoy Mercer, glad you made it." "What did the full report show?" I asked. He touched the display. A wave pattern spread across the room. "At first, we thought the systems had been erased," he said. "They weren't." The image tightened. Every structure, every street, every ship, every body is still there. Something inside me went still. But all active resonance was stopped at the same instant. I stared at him. He gave me the truth in the plainest words possible. Something reached into those systems, he said, and turned life off. No explosion, no invasion, no battle, just a decision made from the dark. The room felt colder. An intelligence officer beside the display stepped forward and opened the final recovered signal. It was weak, damaged, and only 8 seconds long. A child's voice, alien, frightened, then static, then nothing. For a moment, no one in the room moved. That was the moment the mission changed. Not in paperwork, not in command language, in the human heart. This was no longer a military response. It was a promise. Admiral Reed faced the room. The source left a directional trail, faint but enough. It wants to be followed. "Trap?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "almost certainly." No one suggested turning back. No one even looked tempted. I understood then what the Council had never been able to measure. It was not just that humans were stubborn. It was not just that we kept moving when the math said stop. It was that once we decided something was unacceptable, we built our whole future around answering it. The fleet launched within the hour, and we did not go alone. Before departure, a signal came in from Bastion Relay, then another, then 12 more. Council ships, observer craft at first, then escorts, then medical carriers, then 2 war vessels from the Wrath Dominion. General Corval sent only 1 line with his authorization code. We would prefer the dark not learn the wrong lesson. I looked at that message for a long moment. Then I smiled for the first time since Saravon Reach had gone silent. The galaxy had finally understood. Not fully, maybe it never would, but it understood enough. Humanity was not feared because it was cruel, not because it loved war, not because it was the strongest. Humanity was feared because when the line was crossed, when the helpless were taken, when children vanished into silence, and the universe tried to call that a message, humans answered, and we answered with everything. Days later, as the fleet crossed into the black beyond mapped space, I stood on the carrier bridge and watched the stars stretch ahead of us. No one spoke much. No one had to. The grief was still there. So was the anger. So was the love. All of it moving in the same direction now. The Council had once asked me why the galaxy feared humanity. At the time, I had tried to explain it. Now, looking out at the human fleet and the alien ships falling into formation beside us, I finally understood the simplest answer. The galaxy feared humanity because sooner or later, everyone learned the same thing. If darkness touched what humans loved, we came for it. And this time, the dark would learn fear too. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.